So if you've been following along with us in the last video, we created some relationships here that just let us connect all these tables together and tell Access how we want them to interact with each other. And so by using these relationships, we can create a form, which I've created some forms over here. And you'll notice I have tables and forms now instead of just tables. I still have not built any queries or reports yet, but I'll get to that in a later video. And so by kind of playing off of these relationships, I can build forms that make these tables more meaningful. And so what I mean by that, if we go over here and I look at just the transaction table, these are the fields we built in the last video, and I've actually kind of created a couple transactions here. And so you can see these are our IDs. So I have transaction 1 and transaction 2. And again, just to refresh everybody, these are the transactions. These mean just like sales, to a cash register or something. And so I have the sales amounts, and then I have each transaction has some employee who actually performed the sale and some customer who made that purchase, right? And so in this table, all I can see is the IDs, the identification numbers for both the employee and the customer. And so this is good and it works well, but it's kind of weird when you're looking at it. You're like, okay, if I want to know what employee performed this transaction, transaction 1 here, I got to say employee 15523. Okay, so if I go to my employee table, open that up, 15523 is Adrian Samuels, and then I'm like, okay, well, what is his job description? Well, he's job ID 4, so now I've got to go to the job description table, open that up. Job type 4 is a manager, and that's someone who runs the show according to our job description. Very detailed and complex there. And so when I've got to go through all these crazy steps to figure out what means what, and the data's all there, right? I can do that if I want, and everything is sound and it works well. It's just cumbersome, and so I don't want to have to do that. And so what I've done here is created this form called transactions. And so we'll open that up, and when you open a form, it's going to automatically open it up in the form view here, and that means that I can just start typing away, start changing things, adding new records, and doing whatever I want with this form. And so what a form allows us to do is bring a lot of different things together. So the first thing we can do is make changes to tables, right? If I change, so I've got this, if I look at this table, transaction 1 is $45, and so in my form, it's automatically going to the first record, just based on the way I've set it up. And don't worry about all that. I built this thing earlier just so that we could mess with it. And if anyone wants to, we can make a video on building forms later on. But for now, just know that this form is linking, using the links between all these tables to allow us to see a lot more information than what we could see in just a single table over here. Okay. And so our first transaction, and these are our records, we're in record 1 out of 2, right? In our transaction table we have those 2 transactions. And so in our first transaction we have $45. So if I go here and change this to say $23 and hit enter, now if I go to my transaction table, it hasn't updated. I'll have to close that out and open it again, but let's go open that. There we go. Some of these things can be kind of crazy sometimes. So all I did over here was I changed it, and then I switched to the second record just to force it to refresh itself. That's just a deal with Access. And sometimes I'll put a refresh button here and just make some instruction somewhere that says whenever you make a change, just refresh the form. Anyway, so now it's changed our sales here to $23. Okay, and so our forms in that way are actually able to interact with our tables. And so in an ideal database, you would never ever even have to open a table ever, right? And that's not always the case, but ideally you would only ever look at these forms. And so we can do things like that. We can do data entry from a form. We can also pull in data from a table. In this case we were changing data. And we're always in this case, I'll be changing data as well, but instead of creating the data here like I did here with sales, I just created that number, right? I just pulled it out of thin air. With the case of a drop-down box like this is actually set up to take fields or records from this job description table, right? We've got these four job types. I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Not job description. This is payment type. So I've got these four transaction types: cash, credit, debit, or check. And this drop down is actually pulling from that table into the drop down. And so that in that way, I can only choose from these four options here, which really helps with our data integrity issues. I can't misspell anything or use a different word for something. I couldn't type credit card instead of just credit, right, which can make things really confusing. And so, if I wanted to, this is currently set to credit. Maybe I want it to be check. And again, I'm going to switch records just so that it resets that, and then I switch back. And so now if I look, the transaction type here is 4, and if I go to this table, I can make sure that's right. So 4 is check, so it changed it for us. And so now I can do all that, right? I can change all these things, and if I want to, I can either just use this next record button to go all the way past the end, or I can use this one here. That's got this, I don't know how easy this is to see on YouTube, but it's got a little yellow star here, and if I hover over that, it tells me that creates a new record. And actually that's probably going off the bottom of your video, but anyway, if I click on this one, now everything is blank. Okay, so it just took me, notice now it says 3 of 3, right, where even though there's only 2 records, so it's taking me to the third currently non-existent record here. And so I could create something. Let's just say a $55 sale, and then let's pick a payment type. We'll say debit, and then we need a customer here. And so if we want, we can use an existing customer, or we can add a new one. And for now, we'll just use an existing, and we'll get into these buttons in a sec. So let's say this was Sam Watson, and notice it automatically populates with first and last name. And the way I've set this up, if I click on Sam and I try and change his name, I can't do anything. I've locked these out because we don't want any changes to be made here. In this form, we're just trying to create transactions, right? That's all we want to do. Pull existing data from these other tables combined with a sales figure that we create to make a transaction. And so then we've got our employee, and we'll just say John Smith or something. Okay, and so now, and that populates the name as well. And so now, if I go to my transaction table again, you're not going to see anything yet. But if I go here and I just switch to another record, and then I'll switch back, now we should have, oh, well, see, that's something I've always struggled with that with Access. I've X'd out of it. Now when I go back into the table, you'll see that now that third transaction is in there. And that's just something you got to keep in mind. There's not, short of some serious coding, which is doable, it's really tricky to make it update automatically like that. And there's reasons for that. It's not that Access is a poorly conceived database. It's just that there's certain integrity issues, data corruption issues, where it's just kind of covering all its bases, and so that's why you won't see that till you perform certain refresh operations. Anyway, so now I've got the new transaction in there, and now I can scroll through all my different transactions, and this is extremely simple. A lot of times you'll see, I can show you another database if anyone wants to see. It's a lot more complex, where we can actually use a drop-down box to select a certain transaction instead of having to scroll through. And I could actually type in a record here if I wanted to say record 1 and then hit enter. That'll take me to transaction number 1 here. Okay, so that's that. Let me see how I'm doing on time real quick. Okay, we're doing all right. So let's go and check these buttons. So in this case, I'm not able to actually change any customer data, and I'm not able to change any employee data. All I'm able to do is assign a customer or an employee to a particular transaction. So I've created these other 2 forms for that very purpose, and I could either double click this to open the form, or I could just use this button. And a lot of times it's nice to have just a main, kind of a primary form like this, and sometimes you'll even see like this, the name over here might have the word main next to it, or primary or something. And so the idea here is from this form I can access everything I need, including other forms. And so I'll click this Add a Customer button, and so this Add Customer form pops up. And so I'm just going to make up some stuff here. Let's just say card number, first name, we'll say Julie, last name, can't think of a last name, let's just say Larson or something. Phone number 254-555-1998 or something. And so I've got all that in there, and this is just a form I've built, and there's all three of these forms have just a little bit of VBA in them, just to make them, just so I can kind of show you guys a few little things that you can do. But these are pretty basic forms, and so I've typed in all this data, and now I'm just going to click Add New, and it's going to give me a warning. You're going to append one. You're going to add one row of data, and I'll say yes. And now it's added that, and it's deleted this because these need to remain blank after I've added something, because they're just for creating new data. And so I'll just X out of this, and let's go to our customer table, and now we've got a new customer in here called Julie Larson. And notice she's not at the end because the primary key here is this card number, so it's just ordering them. It's automatically ordering by primary key. And while we're here, this is another neat thing here. These expansion buttons. If I expand on, I think Linda had something. If I expand on Linda, I can see that she has this transaction. Okay, and if Linda had bought a lot of different things with our company, if we had a lot of different transactions for her, we would see all those here in this. And this is based solely on relationships. I didn't do anything to make these except create those relationships in the last video. So anyway, and then we've also got our Add Employee button, which does the exact same thing. If I want to add an employee, and then first name, let's just call it Henry Perkins. Job is, and this is another drop down. Again, this is pulling data straight from this job description table here, and we'll just make him a bagger and click Add New Employee, and we'll say yes. And so now we should have him in there. Sure enough, Henry Perkins there. And so we can do a lot of different things like that. And in the next video, we'll talk about reports and queries. And I guess, real quick, we can make one more record. I just went to a new record here, and we'll say $88. And notice this number is being created for us. I could try to put something in there, it won't let me because this is an auto number. Anyway, payment type, we'll just say, sorry about that, guys. Payment type, we'll just say credit or something, and then in this case, well, it still hasn't showed, so let's just go ahead and throw something in there real quick. And let me X out of this, and let's go back into our transaction table now. And so the whole purpose of me doing that was to show you guys that now we have our new customer in here. So we made Julie Larson, and we made Henry Perkins, and so they're both in here now. And I just had to X out again. Normally I have a refresh button. I just didn't make that this time. And so anyway, that's kind of some basic form principles. And like I said, in the next video we'll talk about queries and reports.